thank you very much for being here. So I do have a couple announcements for you today. Since my last briefing, Secretary Rubio traveled to Brussels to attend the NATO Foreign Ministers Conference. During the conference, he had important conversations with our NATO allies about increasing defense spending. Indeed, President Trump deserves credit for completely changing the conversation on NATO defense, and we have a secretary who knows how to have that conversation. Since the November election, 4 NATO allies have publicly announced that they support President Trump's call for allies to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP. This is Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Another 10 allies have announced additional increases to their defense spending since President Trump took office in January. In the words of Secretary Rubio, we want NATO to be stronger. We want NATO to be more viable. And the only way NATO can get stronger and more viable is if our partners, the nation states that comprise this important alliance, have more capability. Now, here's an update from our response to the March 28th earthquake in Burma and Thailand. The United States has made $9 million available to support the people of Burma through our humanitarian partners. Our team of experts is in Burma, surveying conditions on the ground. They arrived on April 1st and deployed to the disaster zone on April 3rd. Our humanitarian response team helps ensure that support is directed to the most affected communities with the greatest needs. We are working with partner countries as well as international and local partner organizations to maximize efficiency and effectiveness. As the response shifts from rescue to emergency relief, the United States has support in place to help with emergency shelter, food, medical support, health access to clean water, and sanitation.
Can you give us any clarity on the cuts, the latest cuts, not including the Burma stuff, but the cuts to USAID and funding to the World Food Program that happened, essentially over the weekend? Because I understand there may have been some changes to those cuts.
Well, yes. So let me get to those details because that is important. We have one thing we can say, because this is a large conversation and various different countries are involved. First of all, 85% of previously existing USAID programs with the World Food Program worldwide remain active and ongoing. So that's 85% when we're talking about the effort that the country has made and continues to make. So it is inaccurate, as some have intimated, that USAID has defunded the World Food Program. That is not true. Or that we've broadly backed away from our commitments to providing life-saving food aid. We've said from the beginning that our commitment to foreign aid remains. It may look different than it has in the past, but in this case, 85% of those USAID programs with the World Food Program worldwide remain active. We have terminated a limited number of World Food Program programs based on specific country or program-level priorities, but what is the story here is that the largest group of World Food Program awards terminated were in Yemen and Afghanistan through an executive order that was issued, based on concern that the funding was benefiting terrorist groups, including the Houthis and the Taliban. These concerns with UN funding have been documented and discussed for years, which is why USAID paused all food assistance in northern Yemen through WFP specifically to mitigate any interference by the Houthis, and has intermittently suspended food assistance across Afghanistan to mitigate Taliban interference. Other awards were terminated because they provided cash-based assistance, which the administration is moving away from, given concerns about misuse and lack of appropriate accountability for American taxpayers here at home, of course, and the accountability they deserve.
You mentioned the Iran conversations between the president and the prime minister yesterday. Can you confirm what the Iranian foreign minister, Arachi, said, which is that Steve Whitkoff, the special envoy, will lead those talks, and that they will be indirect, not direct, as President Trump said? Or is there some clarification you can give us as to how the State Department sees these talks being composed?
Well, I can't confirm anything an Iranian authority is going to say. What I can tell you is what the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has said, is that Mr. Whitkoff, Special Envoy Whitkoff, will be there. So he'll be present. And when it comes to the description of the event, I would refer you back to the President's remarks. That's who I rely on.
Can you define what is meant by direct talks? Because the
I'm
Iranians are insisting at the foreign minister level that they are
Sure.
indirect.
That's nice for the Iranians. I would refer back to the President of the United States, President
And can I,
Donald John Trump.
the other thing I wanted to ask you about, colleges, universities around the country are saying that with little or no notice, to them or their students, there have been massive cancellations of student visas without explanations. In some cases, some of the students have said they are for reckless driving citations. These are not students who are involved in protests. Not that that would necessarily justify it, but just can you clarify the way these are being canceled? Is there a process to determine? Is there a threshold for determining why a student visa would be canceled, and what are the criteria?
Well, we've never gone into the details of the visa process. We don't discuss individual visas because of the privacy issues involved. We don't go into statistics or numbers. We don't go into the rationale for what happens with individual visas. What we can tell you is that the department revokes visas every day in order to secure our borders and to keep our communities safe, and will continue to do so. The criteria, as it is applied appropriately, and that's the extent that this is what we've been dealing with, right? And we've never been, and we're not inclined to answer those specifics, but I think the American people know, as we're seeing, that we take the border seriously, we take the visa process seriously, and the number of revocations, I can say, is dynamic, which is why we don't give those numbers out. Again, we're not going to give statistics, only because of always the continuing fluidity of the situation when it comes to visas and the reasons they are revoked, which is personal and private.
On the Iran talks, is this meeting primarily focusing on preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, or are they going to discuss Iran's support for proxies in the region, considering there were reports that Iran stopped supporting the Houthis, or alerts not supporting the Houthis? That's my first question.
Right. Again, this is not a negotiation. There aren't things being negotiated in that regard. This has been described to me as something that is a matter of determining what's possible in the conversations. It's a touchback, and that's the extent of what will be happening. Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
second question.
Yes.
I have
Oh,
two.
the second, that's
forget.
right. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Second question on Gaza, actually. The situation is horrific. There is no water, there is no electricity, there is no food for almost 1 month. This is a gross violation of international humanitarian law, as you know. What is the United States is doing to alleviate the suffering of civilians in Gaza? And second, since you talked about the meeting between Netanyahu and the secretary, any prospect of a ceasefire that was discussed yesterday?
Our efforts to bring back the ceasefire that we were happy to have at the beginning of this, before Hamas turned its back on the ceasefire, is something that the administration, that the President and Secretary Rubio have said we would want back. There's nothing that is cut off in the sense of where we go from here. It is clear. And the effort, as we are asked every briefing, which is appropriate because of the nature of the issue, is none of us, we're engaging in this to stop the suffering. When there is a resumption of a conflict, and the nature of this conflict, with so many hostages also still being held, it of course disrupts the humanitarian aid. And that is something that concerns all of us and that we seek to change. There is one group that has broken ceasefires, that continues for generations to move the suffering, and that is Hamas. It's a remarkable dynamic where you have multiple players here that are working and constantly making an effort to stop the carnage and the suffering, and to stop the conflict on the ground so that humanitarian aid can flow. And Hamas seems to want nothing to do with that. They continue to go back to creating a framework of victims constantly. So I would say that obviously our effort is to get a ceasefire on the ground again, specifically so we can get aid into the area, specifically so that we can discuss what the region understands, which is the need for a new way to move us out of this horrible cycle. And obviously, that's what we've been dealing with for generations. President Trump is determined to end it once and for all, as is Secretary Rubio. They have one term, and this is why things have to move quickly. It never stops. Their efforts in the Middle East and on Gaza never stop. And that's what we hope for. And the results, hopefully, obviously, is for peace on the ground, for humanitarian aid, and for Gazans and everyone in the region to have a future to look forward to that they can trust.
Chinese involvement in Ukraine-Russia war. President Zelensky today posted a video suggesting that they captured 2 of Chinese nationals fighting in Ukraine on behalf of Russia. Does the Secretary have any comment on that? And does it change your view, your position on how to help Ukraine beef up Ukraine's hands?
Yeah.
Now that we know they're fighting against not one.
It's disturbing. It's disturbing with North Korea participating. It's disturbing with the Chinese soldiers having been captured. We're aware of those reports that Ukraine captured 2 Chinese citizens fighting on behalf of Russia in Ukraine. China is a major enabler of Russia in the war in Ukraine. China provides nearly 80% of the dual-use items Russia needs to sustain the war. 80% comes from China. As President Trump has said, continued cooperation between these 2 nuclear powers will only further contribute to global instability and make the United States and other countries less safe, less secure, and less prosperous. I think that's an understatement.
Just to follow up, Secretary spoke to us during the travel. He said that he will give some time to Russia to clear up its position in terms of whether or not they are serious about the peace talks.
Yes.
Do the events of this weekend, them targeting Zelensky's hometown and other attacks, do those events contribute to the Secretary's position on that?
Well, I know he loves talking to you guys on the trips. We were at NATO together, and he appreciates that. And he had a press conference at the end of NATO where he did go into very specifics when he was asked about the timeline, is that we would know within a matter of weeks if Russia was serious about peace. He said not months, not a year, but a matter of weeks, he said, we would know. And I think that this goes to the argument that they've made, even in the beginning of the talks, some of the summits with Russia, and the first summit was, as the Secretary had noted, was to determine if they were serious. And so this, as I've mentioned, right, these are active men with a term in which to get this done. And plus the lives affected, we don't have time. Every day, every week that goes by affects the quality of people's lives, and some people who are alive now will not be alive tomorrow. So it is held with urgency. It will be a matter of weeks. And of course, you mentioned the attack on Kryvyi Rih, which is I guess the hometown of President Zelensky. It was a Russian Federation ballistic missile strike in a residential neighborhood of that town. It is further underscores President Trump's urgent call for peace. And he's affected by this. It's long time to stop the death and the destruction and end this war, just as we know President Trump has been committed to finding and demanding the return of the missing or stolen Ukrainian children from Russia. So this is the top of the mind for President Trump and for Secretary Rubio.
First of all, an American teenager was shot and killed, and 2 others were shot in the West Bank. Has the U.S. called on the Israeli government to investigate their killings?
We are certainly aware of that dynamic. We send condolences to the families involved. These were teenagers. There is an investigation that is going on. We are aware of the reports from the IDF that this was a counterterrorism act. We need to learn more about the nature of what happened on the ground, but we're aware of that, yes.
And then on the Contract terminations this weekend. Who signed off on those? Was it the
I'm
Secretary?
sorry, the contract?
On the foreign aid
Oh, the
contract
foreign aid, yes.
terminations, is the Secretary himself still canceling those contracts, or has that been delegated elsewhere?
We know, of course, of his full involvement in the beginning. We know that the review had officially ended. We also know of his schedule, and I've asked specifically from his office as well to get me that information, because you and some others have also been asking now about the nature of how this is transpiring. My goal is to get a fuller view now that that review has ended, and that we have bureaus here addressing issues regarding foreign aid, et cetera. And I think that we have, I think it's time now for a fuller understanding of that, and that's part of that, and so we'll get that back to you. But expect, my goal is to have a more comprehensive answer regarding now the process now on the ground for us.
This morning, as you're aware, President Trump and South Korea's acting President Han had a first phone call, and then they discussed South Korea's payment for hosting U.S. Forces Korea. And so do you see any possibility that the State Department somehow engaged in a renegotiation of the co-sharing deal that was actually signed last year? That was my first question.
Well, let me answer that because it'll be a short answer, so I can't answer that, right? So I won't be discussing the nature of diplomatic conversations or anything of that nature, or what choices we might make, either certainly as a government, but certainly not as the State Department. Second question?
The second question is, South Korea, as you're aware, still facing a period of leadership vacuum after President Yoon's removed from office. So do you think that that period of a leadership vacuum will have some negative impact on the alliance between South Korea and the United States? Do you have any concern about it?
I know that our relationship with South Korea is strong, and I know that as an ally that we are expecting them to follow certain rules and norms, and we, of course, enjoy their allyship, and we enjoy that relationship.